News Talk 1070 KHMO presents On the Mark with Mark Hespin. News Talk 1070 KHMO presents On the Mark with Mark Hespin. On the Mark is powered by Kunis Country Honda Hyundai, your number one Honda and Hyundai dealer in the tri-state area at 221 North 36th Street, Quincy. Faith, family, and giving back. That's Kunis Country. And now, here's Mark Hespin.
Good morning, Tri-States, and wherever you may be listening on the News Talk 1070 KHMO app. This is On the Mark. I am Mark Hespin, brought to you by Kunis Honda Hyundai, your number one Honda and Hyundai dealer in the tri-state area. 221 North 36th Street in Quincy. They are the buying center of the tri-states. If you're selling, they are buying. Stop by the dealership. Tell them Mark sent you. Welcome on in to episode 196 of On the Mark here on America's News Talk 1070 KHMO. Broadcasting live from our KHMO studios here in Quincy, Illinois this morning on this August 5th. Can't believe it's already August. Football season is officially upon us. We had the Hall of Fame game. Well, we won't exactly break down the Hall of Fame game, but preseason underway. We will talk some of the big preseason NFL storylines to keep an eye out for. Of course, why Justin Fields is getting MVP discussions. We'll also talk about the NL Central and my Chicago Cubs, hottest team in baseball post All-Star break, and some of the MLB trade deadline stuff. If you want, as always, follow me on Twitter, on Instagram at Mark Hespin, MarkHespen. Follow the show on Facebook. Just search On the Mark KHMO on Facebook. And as always, reach out to me there. Or you're listening through the KHMO app. Download it. It's free. Keep it on the stream. Going to go with you. All of those are good storylines, right? Preseason football, MVP discussion in the NFL. But if we are going to start the show this morning with one thing and one thing only, Hespin headline number one, we've got to talk about it. We've got to jump into it. Major college football realignment underway.
Hespin's headlines On the Mark.
The great shift in college football is upon us, and it is something that may be frightening. Change is scary. Oh, gosh, it's changing. I don't know how to feel. I don't like change. What's going to happen to my traditional rivalries? I want my traditional rivalries. I don't want to see Oregon playing Iowa at Oregon in November. I wouldn't want to see that if I was an Iowa Hawkeyes fan either. But we have a new college football landscape, and it is a college football landscape that I think will shift the course of the sport. It will absolutely dominate the college football world for at least the next decade. And I think it's the type of realignment that we will look back on in 20, 30 years from now and go, the sport changed here. And I really believe it started with Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 and committing to SEC. That forced the hands of the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12, as with the Big 10 to all say, we need to make moves. The SEC was already the great football conference, already dominating the BCS era and the beginning of the college football playoff era. And now they're getting not only two gigantic brands in college football, two of the top 10 biggest brands of college football. The SEC is gaining those two. But it literally was like ripping the heart and the soul from one of their big competitors in the Big 12. And since that moment, what have we seen? We have seen commissioners, we've seen college football conferences be aggressive and literally start cannibalizing each other. And what happens when you have a fish tank with two really big fish and a bunch of other medium-sized fish? As soon as that first big fish, the SEC, took a giant bite out of one of the medium-sized fish, the Big Ten looked and said to itself, I need to start big game hunting too. And that's what the USC UCLA move, but has led to now where we have Oregon, Washington, and University of Washington now joining the Big Ten officially. The Big 12 expanding, taking other teams from the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 is now left for dead. if you're unaware of exactly the details of this, let me put it into perspective in this way for you. Starting next year, literally 1 year from now, the teams in the Pac-12 will be Cal, Oregon State, Stanford, and Washington State. That's 4 teams. That's 4 teams. 1 year from now, the Pac-12 will have 4 teams. I mean, that is a seismic shift. And if you are one of those 4 teams, you've got to figure out, where do you go? What do you do? We'll get to that here in just a moment. So let's talk about the Big Ten as we know it. In 2024, the Big Ten, a year from now, will be the 14 schools that are in there now. We know it: Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern Ohio, Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue, Rutgers, Wisconsin. And it will be adding, in 2024, 1 year from now, all those schools, those 14 schools, plus 4 more: Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA. The Big Ten is now officially the conference that is bi-coastal and Midwestern. The Big Ten has such power and reach with the TV rights. Now, the SEC is probably still the best football conference, right? Because the SEC still has all of the real championship contenders. Because they have Alabama, they have LSU, they have Georgia, and now they're adding Oklahoma and Texas. Gigantic, gigantic football brands. Not even mentioning Florida, and then Tennessee that's on the rise. And, of course, really, really football-centric, powerful schools like in Auburn, like in Arkansas, Ole Miss as well. So, while, yes, the SEC still might be at the top of the top, the best conference, the Big Ten in 1 year from now will have a coastal reach. You think about what the Big Ten will be able to do. The Big Ten will be able to say, hey, at 11 a.m. Central Time, noon Eastern, we can give you Michigan, Ohio State on the East Coast time zone. And then when that game is over, in the 3 o'clock window, we can give you Wisconsin versus USC at Wisconsin. And then when that game is over, in that 6 o'clock window, we can give you Iowa, Nebraska. Big game. It's a late window, big brands. And then in that final window, when that game's even done, 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we can kick off, Oregon, UCLA on the Big Ten Network. All of it Big Ten. All of it. And if they wanted to keep the East Coast viewers up, fine, Penn State at Oregon late. Like the Big Ten can absolutely dominate the TV schedule now from beginning of a Saturday to the end of a Saturday. And that is something that no other conference can sit there and say they can do. Now, the Big 12 is close. The Big 12 has become very, very big with a lot of schools in the Midwest, the South, and on the West Coast. But they don't have the name and the branding and the big names that the Big Ten does. So the SEC is still top of the top, the premier football conference in a year from now. The Big Ten is the most powerful TV brand and the second still best overall football conference with legitimate championship contenders with Ohio State, with Michigan, with Oregon, with USC, legitimate championship contenders, people that have made the playoff. Even Washington made the football playoff in the recent years. So legitimate playoff contenders and second most powerful football school overall. You then have the Pac-12. Now let me, the Big 12. So let me get into the Big 12 for you. The Big 12 to me is going to be fascinating. The Big 12 is basically saying to you, we are comfortable being Division 1A. So it used to be the Power 5 conferences. They're basically saying we are very comfortable being number 3 and living in this world of, no, we don't have the biggest name school in the state, but we have the second biggest name school, and we have a very, very competitive basketball. We're going to be a very great basketball conference with some really solid football. You're telling me that the Big 12 a year from now, with Arizona, Arizona State, Baylor, BYU, Cincinnati, Colorado, Houston, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech, UFC, Utah, and West Virginia. Great basketball conference. And a solid football conference. The winner of the Big 12 automatically should get a bid. Automatically, especially with the college football playoff expanding to what it is. It's expanding, to 12 teams? Absolutely. The Big 12 have positioned themselves to say, we're better off than the Pac-12 is dead, and everyone's looking at the ACC next going, let's cannibalize the ACC. And the reason everyone's looking at the ACC to cannibalize is because the SEC is now desperate to make a move to combat the Big Ten. The Big Ten is now bi-coastal, right? And what the SEC can do is they can't take any West Coast teams. There's nothing left for the SEC to take out West. What are you going to take? Cal? Stanford? That makes no sense for Cal or Stanford or Oregon State to join the SEC. Makes no sense at all. And if you're the SEC, you don't want those brands anyways. You don't want Cal as a brand. You don't want Oregon State as a brand. You don't want Stanford in the SEC. The SEC, to counterpunch what the Big Ten has done, the only thing that makes sense is they poach from the top of the ACC. They're going to try to poach from the top. The scary thing, though, if you are the SEC in doing that, is if you're the SEC, yes, you would love to add Clemson, Florida State, Miami, right? But you're also going to make the Big Ten stronger. You're going to make the SEC is not going to take the whole ACC. And what the Big Ten lacks right now is a presence in the South. But if the ACC folds, North Carolina is a shoo-in for the Big Ten. And I would argue the Big Ten would be smart to also take Boston College, Louisville, and either a Virginia or a Georgia Tech to have more of a presence in the South. And if you let the Big Ten start getting into the South, if you're the SEC and you start poaching and make the ACC fall apart, now the Big Ten, while yes, the SEC, especially if they had Clemson, Florida State, Miami, the SEC will by far still be the top football conference. But the Big Ten will grow its strength as the best TV scheduling conference, and that money will keep the Big Ten extremely competitive top-line football with the SEC. So all the eyes right now, in my opinion, with where we sit with college football realignment is, will the SEC get aggressive in taking down the ACC? And if for the ACC, can you hold on as long as you can to your big brands, Miami, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina? Can you hold on to those big brands? Keep your conference afloat, and again, get an automatic bid into the playoffs. The problem right now that the ACC, the Big 12 are facing is that even though the playoff is expanding, you could argue that there's a legitimate world where the playoff is 5 Big 10, 5 SEC, and then 1 ACC, 1 Big 12. And the money you get from the playoff is so much, and the revenue sharing from it, letting the SEC and the ACC just gobble up all that money is going to kill your programs anyways. The Big 12 has got to fight for an automatic bid and have at-large availability. Same with ACC. So that's where we stand. I think the next key domino to keep an eye on will be, will the ACC fall if it does fall, which schools leave first and where do they go? Right? Now, the Big 12 can eat up some of the ACC if it starts to fall. Absolutely. Now, as you're listening on the Mark here, News Talk 1070 KHMO and the KHMO app, talking about conference realignment here. I know I'm getting some comments on the Facebook Live. I can't read any of it. David, my guy David. Yeah. Start of the day to the end of the day. David, you're absolutely right. That is what now. If you want to talk about like what is making all this happen, it is the TV revenue, right? It is the fact that there's so much money out there from these networks to broadcast these games. You want that content. And the Big Ten network, the SEC network, have become so big and powerful, the money that the schools get from it. The Pac-12 folded because they couldn't find a TV deal. Part of that is because West Coast football doesn't have the appeal. None of the networks were like totally overbidding for it. And with USC and UCLA leaving already, there's no the brand recognition of Oregon and Washington. Why would people in Florida and in South Carolina and in Ohio stay up late to watch Oregon and Washington games? Well, they will now because it affects the Big Ten, and it'll be on the Big Ten network. So they were struggling to get the Apple TV streaming deal was never going to work. It was never going to save the Pac-12. And the streaming money is huge. So before I move on from this topic, again, the biggest thing to think about is the SEC is still the dominant football conference as far as top-line football. The Big Ten is very, very close. Very, very close. And they, together in a year from now, absolutely will dominate the best of the best in college football. The ACC and the Big 12 are in solid spots. Both of the conferences have enough big names to where they each deserve automatic bids in the future college football playoff, however that landscape will work. If you win the ACC or you win the Big 12, you will absolutely get a spot in the playoff because the conferences are good enough to warrant that. Correct? Right? That's what. So those are two key points. The next key point for where we at is, will the ACC fold like the Pac-10, the Pac-12? Which dominoes will go? And will the SEC open the floodgates for the Big Ten to start getting into the South with recruiting and TV? And if you're the Big Ten, all eyes on getting North Carolina, on getting Virginia, and maybe trying to steal a Louisville or a Florida State before you allow them to get into the SEC. Can you get your fingers down there into the southern states and recruit? That could be huge for the Big Ten. Finally, the last point we got to make is, what is left with these four teams in the Pac-12? What do you do if you are the Pac-12 and you have legitimately Oregon State, Washington, Stanford, and Cal? Well, Stanford really has two options here. Stanford and Cal together have like two options. They either try to go independent and join with Notre Dame and roll with the independent thing because they're really great academic schools and they have solid branding. Or that Stanford and Cal should try to get in with the Big Ten. Stanford and Cal feel more like Big Ten schools than they do Mountain West or anything like that. But if you are Washington State and Oregon State, absolutely join the Mountain West. The Mountain West Conference is nothing to scoff at. It is a solid football conference. You have Boise State, you have Nevada, UNLV, Wyoming. You could join Oregon State and Washington State could join that football conference right now, and you could absolutely dominate it and have a home. I know it's not ideal. You went from a Power 5 school where you could get an automatic bid if you won it to a mid-level Division I football program. But I think that's your only option at this point, is hope that the Mountain West throws you a lifeline and you can go in there and you can beat up on some of those Mountain West schools because the Pac-12 is dead. Maybe convince try to sell yourself to the Big 12. But the Big 12 is getting pretty darn big. I think the Big 12 is waiting, and they want to eye the ACC folding. That's the same with the Big 10. The Big 10 is saying to Cal and Stanford, we like you, but we would much rather have North Carolina, Boston College, and Virginia. And so we're going to wait and see what happens with the ACC. We'll call you if nothing works out. And so I really don't know what to do if you're Cal and Stanford. You're in a tough spot because they do not feel like Mountain West programs, and they're on a football island out there. On a basketball, they're SOL. And so we'll have to keep our eye on that. I mean, the next big domino fall, watch the ACC. What will happen with the ACC? Can the ACC survive? Will it expand? And will it be able to stave off the SEC starting to poach? There is a lot. There's a lot of big names in the ACC that the Big Ten and the SEC would love to get their hands on. You're listening on the Mark News Talk 1070 KHMO and the KHMO app, brought to you by Kunis Honda Hyundai, your number one Honda and Hyundai dealer in the tri-state area, 221 North 36th Street in Quincy. When we come back, preseason football has begun. I'm going to give you 3 storylines to keep your eye on this preseason. Things that are important, things that will actually matter for the regular season beyond just, will that third-string linebacker make it on my team or not? Live and local on America's News Talk 1070 KHMO and the KHMO app. It's on the Mark.
And style and security.
From the Salvation Army, welcome to Heartbeat.
Pilots say that when flying, for every degree you fly off course, you'll miss your target landing spot by 92 feet for every mile flown. That amounts to being about 1 mile off target for every 60 feet you fly. The longer you travel off course, the further you'll be from the intended target. Being only 1 degree off can make a critical difference in where you will land. Just as it's hard to recognize being 1 degree off while flying at 30,000 feet, it's also hard to realize 1 degree failures in our lives. We need a crystal clear flight plan, and with God as your pilot, your safe arrival at the final destination is guaranteed.
For more episodes of Heartbeat, visit salvationarmyradio.org.
Radio waves and memories surf. A song washes you back to the beach that fall when love was all. At work, bone tired, a whispered lyric will make you dance, inspired. And when the computers glow at night is the only light, a voice might say the thing that makes the save. And the radio wave rolls on. Wherever you hear it, radio moves. To learn more, go to radioheardhere.com.
Brought to you by this radio station to remind you that radio is heard here. Radio is heard everywhere.
1070 KHMO.
Welcome on back to On the Mark here on News Talk 1070 KHMO and the KHMO app, brought to you by Kunis Honda Hyundai, your number one Honda and Hyundai dealer in the tri-state area, 221 North 36th Street in Quincy. They are the buying center of the tri-states. If you're selling your car, get off Facebook Marketplace. Don't deal with creepy dudes messaging you on Facebook. Go to Kunis Honda Hyundai. Sell your car directly to them. They will pay top dollar. You don't have to buy from them to sell from them, but they have over 3,000 new and used vehicles to choose from. You're probably going to want to buy your next vehicle from Kunis Honda Hyundai. Final point on conference realignment. We were just talking about this with my Facebook Live audience. As always, you can follow the show on the Mark KHMO on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, at Mark Hespin. Get involved with the conversation on the Facebook Live. The MAC is in a really solid spot here. The MAC should offer Oregon State and Washington State a lifeline. Join the MAC. The MAC is a very, very solid middle-tier football conference, and the MAC is in a great spot to also absorb the bottom of the ACC that doesn't get claimed by the Big Ten and the SEC if the ACC falls apart as well. So the MAC has a position here to grow. NC State in the MAC feels right. You know what I mean? Pitt, If it doesn't get picked up in the MAC, feels right, especially if you add a brand like an Oregon State and a Washington State. And those teams could go in there and immediately be big dogs in the MAC with the Toledos, the Northern Illinois, the Bowling Greens, the Ball States. And those are it's a conference that it wouldn't be shocking to see a MAC school in an expanded college football playoff. The way it expands if you run the table and you beat up on your conference, because it's a solid football conference. All right, let's move on. Preseason storylines we got to keep an eye on in the NFL. Hespin headline number 2.
Hespin's headlines on the mark.
Okay, so the NFL preseason is officially upon us, and they've shrunk the preseason to 3 games. I think it'll eventually get to 2 games. Obviously, one of the things to always keep an eye on is injuries. I didn't want to use that as a storyline. One of the things to always keep an eye on is, will certain teams play starters and how much will they play? But I think there are 3, to me, unique storylines that we definitely want to keep an eye on throughout the preseason. And let's start with number 1, and that's going to be, do we get a real look at Jordan Love in Green Bay? One of the things I've been working on over the last 2 weeks is my predictions for the NFL upcoming season. Which teams are going to win each division? Which team's going to end up with the number 1 overall seed? I'm literally going through every single game, trying to pick games like I do every single year. It's so stupid to do, but it's one of my favorite things to give you guys a preview of what I think going into the football season. So then we can talk about expectations versus reality and the way it all breaks down during the football season, right? And one of the hardest things to predict is the Green Bay Packers. They have talent. It is a roster that has talent. I think they have less talent than Minnesota. I think they have less talent than Detroit. I think their talent level is on par with Chicago. Now Chicago's signing Yannick Ngakoue to really help fill one of their big needs, which is just someone to rush the passer. I think it's right on par, if not slightly below Chicago. But it's not a talent-less roster. This is it's not a team that's just a bunch of rookies out there with no direction. It is a coach who is thought of very highly in the league, who's been to multiple NFC championship games, deep runs in the NFC playoffs. So Jordan Love, how much of a look do we get at Jordan Love in the preseason? I think that's something to keep our eyes on. I don't expect him week 1. I would say I would be shocked if in week 2 we don't get a real solid quarter and a half, 2-quarter look at Jordan Love. I think the Packers need it. I think the Packers are also scared of maybe to do it, because I think they know us in the media, in the sports media world, all eyes are going to be on Jordan Love when he takes snaps. We got to start getting a look at this kid going into year 4 and figuring out what he is and what he can do with this historic cornerstone NFL franchise. So that's number 1. Number 2, there are 3 quarterbacks that are on career salvage mode, and the teams that are with them are on high alert for trade value and salvage. Start with Zach Wilson. He had a nice little showing in the Hall of Fame game. He's on career salvage mode. Zach Wilson is desperately now. You were the number 2 overall pick 3 years ago, and now you are a backup quarterback. So when you fall from grace in that way, like the Mitchell Trubisky's before and all in recent history, it happens all the time, right? When a high pick, first-round pick gets demoted and you're in this spot, the preseason is everything, because it gives you those glimpses and those glimmers to where if a starter goes down or a team is looking for has an older quarterback, is maybe looking for the next young guy, he has a chance for career salvage. And if you're the Jets, the most important thing that can come from Zach Wilson this preseason is not, Zach Wilson develops and learns from Aaron Rodgers, and in 2 years from now he's our starter. I think the Jets have moved on as a franchise. The Jets are looking for pick salvage. Can the Jets get a 3rd-round pick for Zach Wilson and salvage something if he balls out in the preseason and a team gets desperate? That's what you're looking for if you're the Jets. It's salvage. Zach Wilson trying to salvage his career. The Jets are trying to salvage drafting him so high. Now, the Jets didn't give up anything to get Zach Wilson because, remember, they were just bad, and that's why they got the second overall pick. So you're just trying to salvage something. The 49ers, on the other hand, they gave up a ton to get Trey Lance. They are in, please, for the love of God, someone just give us a 4th-round pick for Trey Lance. Trey Lance is going to be a fascinating watch this preseason. He might play the whole first game. I don't know if you're the Niners, why would you play Darnold? And if you are the Niners, you're not going to play Purdy. I mean, Trey Lance might play whole games for the Niners. And frankly, that's what Trey Lance needs. And the Niners are flipping a coin, hoping he goes out there and plays really, really well so they can get something for him. They got to get something for him. You know, we're seeing bad video come out of Trey Lance in camp, and I think there's good and bad to that. The Niners have to show their fans why he's not starting and why Mr. Irrelevant is going to start over him, and because they're seeing this stuff and not all the fans are. So I think some of that video leaking is a good thing for the Niners in the sense of, like, guys, you know, this is why Trey Lance isn't starting. He can't even complete a pass. But it's also a bad thing because it makes them look really, really dumb. And John Lynch really dumb because he was the one who traded up so much and mortgaged the future of his team to go get this guy, and he looks like a total bust. So it's a huge preseason for Trey Lance, and I can't wait to watch it. I'm very excited. Sam Darnold is the other person in that group number 2. How much does Darnold play? The less Darnold plays, the more it makes me feel like Darnold might actually start the season. But it also, I think, for Sam Darnold, you want to go in there and win that job. I think Sam Darnold, I think he's smart enough to know this is, if I can somehow beat out Brock Purdy and I could come out here and ball out in the little chance, if Sam Darnold starts the game, first game for the 49ers. I mean, it is Sam Darnold going 7 for 7, leading his team on a touchdown drive to start. That will be massive because if you're Sam Darnold, this is absolutely it. He could keep being a backup for a while. He's a good dude. Get a Mitchell Trubisky vibe where it's like, oh, he's capable. He's just a good dude. He's just not maybe good enough. But you have the 49ers are the keys to the Ferrari. I mean, that is the mansion ready to go turnkey. You do not want to let go of those keys. You do not. And if you're Sam Darnold, this is going to matter a lot. It's going to matter a lot. Finally, the last thing to keep an eye out for is obviously the rookies. We'll get a first real look at Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, who are expected to start for their teams as far as the season goes. So they may not play week 1 of the preseason. We may have to wait till week 2. But then also Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. The talk is kind of floating around that Anthony Richardson and Will Levis probably won't start the season for the Colts and the Titans. So seeing them get the reps and the value of the reps and the talent and getting to watch Anthony Richardson finally, you know, this kind of big unknown on the big stage. Very excited to watch the rookies play. It's always exciting to watch rookie quarterbacks play. This year with those 4 names, we didn't really get it last year, right? Because Pickett was only first rounder, and then everyone else fell so far. Ritter and all those guys. Sam Howell's like, you don't really care that much. You knew they weren't going to be necessarily top-end starters. So for these 4 guys, you know, 3 in the first round and Levis early in the second round and being a projected first rounder, this is going to be big. This is going to be a really, really interesting and fun to watch as the preseason gets underway. You're listening on the Mark News Talk 1070 KHMO and the KHMO app. Brought to you by Kunis Honda Hyundai. When we come back, I'm not going to give you their records yet. That's going to start happening next week on the show. But I'm going to start unveiling a little bit, giving you a peek into my brain of teams I expect to make a jump, like increase their win total by at least 2 games, maybe more, and teams I expected to take a tumble, which is, in my opinion, decrease their win total from last year by 2 games or maybe more. So a jump and an increase, a 2-game swing. I'll start giving you some names of some teams and why I kind of feel that way. Now, I'm saying they're going to all make the playoffs or miss the playoffs, but just a jump up or down for certain teams. It's On the Mark, News Talk 1070 KHMO and the KHMO app.
Did you know that when you make time to do 3 simple things each day with your children, talking, reading, and singing, you're helping to shape and strengthen their brains for the years to come? I'd love to look at the pictures in a book and notice little details about the characters. I pause along the way to ask my child to wonder about how they might feel. When you ask open-ended questions like, what do you notice? Or what do you think will happen next? You're inviting them to be curious. All these rich conversations help develop both their vocabularies and their thinking skills. And it's a great way for you and your child to bond and discover the world together. As a father, helping my child is the most important thing to me. Each of us has the power to create a strong start for our children by talking, reading, and singing with them from the moment they're born, and help them to enter school ready to learn and succeed in life. Visit TalkingIsTeaching.org for free tips, resources, and ideas on how to transform everyday moments into magical moments for learning.
Are they ready? Are you ready? Giving your child their first phone is an important and often difficult decision. After all, it is a milestone in your child's development. The Phone Ready quiz from the American Academy of Pediatrics can help make this decision easier. Go to healthychildren.org/Phone Ready quiz to take a short questionnaire developed by pediatricians that'll help you decide if you and your child are ready, almost ready, or not yet ready for their first phone. And get tips about how your child can develop a healthy relationship with technology. So, are they ready, almost ready, or not yet ready? What about you? Go to healthychildren.org/Phone Ready quiz today. Just 10 short questions can help you find out. That's healthychildren.org/Phone Ready quiz.
My son knows he should never touch my gun.
He never talked to me about his gun.
I keep the gun where she can't find it.
He thinks I don't know where it is.
She doesn't
I know.
Someone you love could be hurt by a gun accident in your home. Keep your gun locked away when it's not being carried.
Take the time to talk with your kids.
Have the talk with your family about gun safety.
Talk to your family about firearm safety. Learn how at projectchildsafe.org/welcome.
Are you ready to smell better?
Forecast from the News Talk 1070 KHMO Weather Center. Overcast today with a high of 81. Northwest winds 8 to 15 miles per hour. Mainly cloudy skies tonight. Lows around 65. Daytime highs approaching 84 tomorrow. Scattered thunderstorms likely. Right now 73.
Welcome on back to On the Mark here on News Talk 1070 KHMO, the KHMO app, brought to you by Kunis Honda Hyundai, your number one Honda and Hyundai dealer in the Tri-State area, 221 North 36th Street in Quincy. Over 3,000 new and used vehicles to choose from. You have online shopping, shopkunis.com, the No Fear Powertrain lifetime warranty. Tell them Mark sent you. All right, as we start the kind of descent here of the show. If we're on the airplane, we start now slowly descending. One of the things I wanted to spend some time on this morning is reminding everyone of my listeners, and I love this time of the year, because for the rest of this month in August and the first week of September, as we gear up towards the actual football starting on September 7th, we are going to start trying to predict which team's going to win each division. We'll start with like the AFC and the NFC South next week, go on from there. We'll do Souths, Norths, Easts, and Wests over the next 4 weeks. So we don't do it all in one day. And we'll try to slowly build it. Now, until the season actually starts, we may make an amendment or two. If all of a sudden, knock on wood, I'm not going to say your team's favorite player, but if a star quarterback goes down who we expect to, be in the MVP conversation, that's obviously going to change certain things how we feel. We hope that doesn't happen, but we'll begin that process. Well, I've been working on that process over the last couple weeks and trying to really start figuring out teams' records and picking, literally going game by game of all the games coming up in the next NFL season. And as I've started to do this, there have become a couple things that are clear to me. Like every NFL season, it's usually always 3 or 4 teams that made the playoffs the year before don't make the playoffs the next year. It's never the same exact group of teams. There are always teams they come out of nowhere, last to first, right? And there are always teams that then go first to last, like it falls off the map, like the Rams last year, right? So I am going to give you an idea. Just going to put it out there in a very general sense of some teams I think are going to be risers and fallers. If you're a riser, I think you're going to improve your win total by at least 2 games. So it doesn't mean it doesn't mean every team I'm going to say here's a riser is going to win their division or make the playoffs even. But I'm just saying I expect them to win at least 2 more games than they won the year before. For the fallers, it's the same idea. It doesn't mean they're going to miss the playoffs, but I think they're probably going to lose at least 2 more games than they had won in the previous year. So it's a rise and a fall, 2-game swing. So let's start with the fact that I think the Detroit Lions are risers. And everyone's very high in the Lions, and I think they should be. I don't think it's smoke. And they were a 9-win team. I do not think it's crazy at all to think that Detroit can be an 11-win team, if not more. Detroit has legitimate offensive star power weapons. They have, in my estimation, as of this morning, the best quarterback in the division. I think they have one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFC. I would take Jared Goff over any quarterback in the NFC South. I would take Jared Goff over any quarterback not named Matt Stafford in the NFC West. And I would take Jared Goff over Dak, over Daniel Jones. So maybe he's the 4th because I wouldn't take him over Jalen Hurts, but he's right there. So I think in a majority, when you're picking games, a lot of it comes down to who's got the better quarterback. And I think Jared Goff, while he may be the 10th, 11th best quarterback in the NFL, somewhere in that 9 to 13 range, in the NFC, that means you're like the 4th or 5th best quarterback. And if you're the 4th or 5th best quarterback in a lot of your matchups with a really nice defense, with some skill players who are going to make a leap, a very good defensive front, a coaching staff going into year 3 that is building momentum. Remember, the Lions ended the season on a 2-game win streak. They were 1-6 to start the year. I mean, they went, I think, 8-2 down the stretch. One of the hot teams in the league, and they have a workable schedule because they weren't a playoff team. Their schedule's workable, so the Lions are absolutely there. The Jags. Now, again, people are very high on the Jags, but the Jags were only a 9-win team last year. They snuck into the playoffs in that 5-game win streak to end the year. I expect the Jags to make a leap forward. 2nd year of Doug Peterson, 3rd year of Trevor Lawrence, adding offensive weapons. Ridley. I mean, the Jags, I think, are poised to have a growth year, and I think that means double-digit wins for the Jags, 11 or more. I think the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints, with Andy Dalton, were a 7-10 team. I think the division is worse. You lose Tom Brady. You have a rookie in Carolina. We don't know who's going to start in Tampa. And you have a 4th rounder, 3rd rounder in Desmond Ridder, year 2 in Atlanta. I think New Orleans was a 7-win team. I could easily see New Orleans getting above 500 and being a 9-win team. Does that mean they're going to, win 11 games? No, but I just think that they are a team poised. You add Derek Carr, a legitimate starting quarterback in that division. I think I see them as a 9-win team at least. The Rams, again, this is based off the fact that I think Stafford's going to be healthy, and so I think they're going to win 7 or more games. They were a 5-win team, so I expect them with a healthy Matt Stafford for the year to win at least 7 games. Now, I'll tell you later on if I think they're going to win more, but I expect them to at least win 7. And I think the Chicago Bears, I think that's an easy one. The Bears were a 3-win team. It would be a gigantic failure for this team. There was something catastrophic would have to happen for this team not to get to at least 5 wins. Because there's way too much talent on this team now for them to not be at least a 5-win team. And that's an easy one. Teams, I think, expect a step back from. A lot of this is just because they won a lot of games last year. The Vikings were 13-4. I think this Vikings team is still solid, but they could be an 11-win team, and it could still be a step back. Does that make sense? The Cowboys, again, the Cowboys were 12-5. They lost their offensive coordinator, no Zeke, Pollard coming off a big injury. I think this Cowboys team could still be solid, still maybe be a double-digit win team, but they're taking a step back from 12 wins. I don't see them growing or maintaining 12 this year. I don't. And then the 49ers. The 49ers won 13 games. It's a lot of games. They ended the season on a 10-game win streak. I think the division will be better. I think the Rams will be better. I think the Seahawks are going to maintain, if not improve. And let's be honest. The NFL is full of professionals, and they have some tape on Brock Purdy now. So I think there's going to be some answers for Brock Purdy. So those are my risers and fallers. Next week, we'll start actually giving you records, predictions, things like that. You're listening on the Mark News Talk 1070 KHMO and the KHMO app. Last quick break, a couple quick hitters to wrap up the show.
For over a century, veterans have extreme PTSD all their lives.
I know people that had PTSD from having COVID, but are better now. I can't imagine anyone having it their entire lives.
Imagine sheltering in place forever. Help Heal Veterans, with the support of citizens like you, helps these isolated or sick veterans at no charge to them.
How can I help?
Learn more at healvets.org.
Healvets.org?
Yes. This message is furnished by Help Heal Veterans.
1070 KHMO.
Welcome on back to On the Mark here on News Talk 1070 KHMO, the KHMO app, brought to you by Cunis Honda Hyundai, your number one Honda and Hyundai dealer in the tri-state area, 221 North 36th Street in Quincy. They are the buying center of the tri-states. If you're selling, they're buying. Tell them Mark sent you. All right. So, wrapping up the show here with a couple quick hitter topics. Follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, at Mark Hespen, MarkHespen. Justin Fields, that was the talk all this past week was, oh my God, look at all the money coming in Vegas on Justin Fields to win the MVP. First and foremost, anytime things are coming from Vegas, again, it's about people trying to find value at the beginning of the season. There are some over-under win totals. I'm going to start tweeting that stuff out, the gambling stuff, as we get closer, that I think there's some great value out there. I really do. And Justin Fields at plus 2,000, he's worked it all the way up now. I think a lot of people are getting him at even higher odds. It's great value because Justin Fields is poised to have a pop year like Jalen Hurts did last year. When you're making a bet like that, why would you just put a ton of money on Patrick Mahomes to win the MVP? His odds aren't that great because, well, he should probably win the MVP. He's the best player in football. So you want to, when you're trying to find that person who's could have a pop year and you could get some good return on your investment. And Justin Fields makes sense. Year 3, this is all he'd have to do to get in the MVP discussion and win the MVP. If he get the Bears to the playoffs, you know what I mean, and cut down the interceptions and you know, first 4,000-yard passer in Bears history, there's a lot of easy storylines to be like, that dude's the MVP. And the media loves storylines, so that's what they're looking for. But it's a huge year for Justin Fields. This is a massive year for Justin Fields. It's a make or break year. It really is. Talk more about that when we get to the Bears win total preview. Justin Fields could go from an MVP darling right now to next year. We're not even talking about him, depending on how the year goes. I mean, let's be real. It's a make or break year for Justin Fields. Absolutely is. Can the Cubs win the NL Central? I think they can. Couple games back here now as we speak. The Cubs, the hottest team in baseball, post All-Star break, putting up massive run total numbers. This is fun to watch. This is what fans want. This is what a year ago I was yelling at the Cubs about when they were sellers at the trade deadline. And 2 years ago, like the Braves won the World Series. They were just hanging above 500 at the trade deadline. The trade deadline can change everything for you. And fans buy in if you're willing to go all in for it. Make a couple moves. Stay involved. Baseball is different from basketball. In the NBA, it sucks being mediocre and being middle of the pack. Baseball, it can be the most thrilling thing ever, depending on where the other teams in your division are. And then finally, the Lakers and AD massive extension through 2028. I think it was the right move. AD, when healthy and playing well, is still a top 10 player in the NBA. The Lakers need to show that stability. Hey, we still have a superstar. We're going to keep him around because they don't know what LeBron James is going to do in the future. So I like the Lakers sticking with AD and having a superstar big man. Great to be back with you live. We'll see you next week. We'll start our NFL win total previews. It's on the Mark. News Talk 1070 KHMO.
Hi, this is Jason Buxman from